The air in the Afar Triangle 4 million years ago doesn't smell like the desert it is today. It smells of damp earth, ripening figs, and the electric tension of a changing world. Imagine you are standing on the edge of a shrinking forest. To your back, the canopy is a familiar, shadowed sanctuary. To your front, the horizon has cracked open. The great tectonic plates of Africa are pulling apart, tearing the landscape into a mosaic of woodland and vast golden grasslands. Meet the protagonist of our first chapter, a creature neither fully ape nor yet human. For millions of years, her ancestors lived in the safety of the green heights. But the climate is drying. The trees are retreating, moving further apart like friends drifting away in a crowd. To get from one source of food to the next, she can no longer simply swing from branch to branch. She has to cross the open ground. In the tall grass, safety is a memory. This is the territory of the Dinophilis, a saber-toothed predator designed for the hunt. If our ancestor moves on all fours like a chimpanzee, her eyes are low to the ground. She is blind to the movement in the stalks. But watch her as she reaches the edge of the clearing. She does something revolutionary. She shifts her weight. She straightens her knees. She stands. This isn't just a change in posture, it is a biological uprising. By rising onto two legs, she frees her hands to carry food, offspring, or stones. More importantly, she exposes less of her body to the punishing midday sun and lifts her head high enough to see over the grass. She sees the predator before it sees her. This transition was written into the very marrow of the fossils we find today. When we look at the early Australopithecus remains, we see the smoking gun of bipedalism, the foramen magnum, the hole where the spine enters the skull, has migrated from the back of the head to the bottom. Her pelvis has flared and shortened into a sturdy bowl to support her internal organs against the pull of gravity. Her big toe has lost its ability to grasp branches and instead has aligned with the others to act as a lever, pushing her forward into a future she cannot yet imagine. The dawn of bipedalism wasn't a choice made in a day. It was a million-year transition triggered by a changing planet. As she takes those first tentative, wobbling steps across the savanna, she is breaking the mold of the primate world. She is the first of us to walk toward the horizon. Imagine the year is 1974. The setting is the scorching, cracked earth of Hadar, Ethiopia. Paleoanthropologist Donald Johanson and his graduate student Tom Gray are walking back to their Land Rover after a long morning of surveying. The heat is shimmering off the sand, making the horizon dance. Johanson stops. A fragment of a forearm bone catches his eye on a dusty slope, then a piece of a skull, then a thigh bone. As they brush away the silt of 3 million years, they realize they aren't just looking at a fossil, they are looking at a person. That night, as the camp celebrated to the sound of the Beatles' "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" playing on a cassette recorder, a legend was named. Lucy, or Dinkinesh, meaning "you are marvelous" in Amharic, became the face of our ancient past. Lucy was a mosaic of contradictions. Standing only about 3.5 feet tall, she looked remarkably like an ape from the neck up. Her brain was roughly the size of a large orange, and her jaw jutted forward with powerful chewing muscles. But from the neck down, the story changed completely. Her pelvis was broad, her knees angled inward to center her weight, and her spine had the telltale S-curve of a habitual walker. She lived in a world of transition. We can see in her long, slightly curved finger bones that she still spent time in the trees, perhaps sleeping in nests high above the reach of hyenas. But her feet, as evidenced by the hauntingly human-like 3.6-million-year-old Laetoli footprints found in Tanzania, had a distinct arch and a big toe that pointed forward. These prints tell a story of a family walking through volcanic ash, one larger set of prints and one smaller, moving with a gait nearly identical to your own. Lucy's discovery shattered the brain-first myth. For decades, scientists believed we evolved large brains first, which then allowed us to figure out how to walk. Lucy proved the opposite. We stood up first, and the thinking part came much, much later. She was the bridge. She was a creature that could navigate the canopy of the old world while claiming the soil of the new one. She represents the moment our lineage committed to the earth. Survival for an Australopithecus was a 24-hour-a-day job. Without fire to cook food, sharp claws to fight, or a high-speed sprint to escape, how did they last for 1,000,000 years? The answer is written in their teeth. If you were to look into the mouth of an afarensis or an africanus, you would see massive molars covered in thick enamel. Using modern scanning technology, we can look at microwear, tiny scratches and pits left on the teeth by the very last meals they ate. These marks tell us that while they preferred soft fruits, they were fallback specialists. When the fruit disappeared during the dry season, they survived on tough tubers, sedges, and gritty underground roots. They were the ultimate generalists. While other species specialized and eventually went extinct when their specific food source vanished, the Australopiths were adaptable. They likely used unshaped stones to crack nuts or sticks to dig for succulent bulbs hidden beneath the baked earth. They weren't hunters yet. They were the hunted. They lived in small social groups, relying on social intelligence to survive. Imagine them huddled together at dusk, using vocalizations and gestures to warn of a leopard in the brush. Their survival strategy wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being the most flexible. They ate what the savanna gave them, and in doing so, they fueled the slow metabolic fire that would eventually lead to the energy-hungry brains of the first humans. The story of human evolution is often drawn as a straight, tidy ladder, with one species stepping upward to the next until we reach ourselves. But the reality is far more chaotic, vibrant, and experimental. By 3 million years ago, the Australopith experiment was in full swing, and the family tree was beginning to sprout branches in every direction across the African continent. This chapter takes us away from Lucy's home in Ethiopia and heads south toward the jagged limestone caves of South Africa, where a new kind of ancestor was waiting to be found. In 1924, a box of fossilized debris from a lime quarry at Tong arrived on the desk of anatomist Raymond Dart. Inside, he found something that looked like the missing link the world had been searching for: the skull of a young child, only about 3 years old. This was the Tong child, the first specimen of Australopithecus africanus. Unlike Lucy's species, Africanus had a slightly more rounded skull, a flatter face, and teeth that were even more human-like. For the first time, science had to grapple with the fact that our cradle wasn't in Europe or Asia, but in the heart of Africa. But as the millennia rolled on, the environment continued to challenge these creatures. The African climate became even more erratic, swinging between periods of intense wetness and bone-dry aridity. Evolution's response to this was a fascinating fork in the road. Imagine two cousins living side by side on the same savanna, each choosing a different path to survival. On one side, you had the gracile Australopiths, slender, agile, and generalists. These were the descendants of Lucy and the relatives of the town child. They kept their options open, eating a bit of everything and relying on their wits. On the other, a radical new form appeared, the robust Australopiths, known as Paranthropus. If you saw a Paranthropus today, you would be struck by their incredible power. They were built like biological tanks. Their faces were wide and dish-shaped, with enormous cheekbones that acted as anchors for enormous chewing muscles. On top of their heads, they grew a sagittal crest, a ridge of bone that looked like a permanent mohawk, which served as a massive attachment point for their jaw muscles. Why such heavy equipment? Because they had specialized. While the gracile lineage stayed flexible, the robust lineage became the masters of the tough stuff. They could grind down the hardest seeds, the grittiest roots, and the most fibrous grasses that no other primate could touch. This was a million-year-long competition of strategies. One group doubled down on physical specialized equipment, while the other, our direct ancestors, remained jacks of all trades. This period of the branching tree reminds us that being human wasn't an inevitable outcome. We were just one of many variations on a theme, a group of cousins navigating a changing world, each trying to find a way to stay alive long enough to see the next sunrise. The African landscape was a laboratory of life, and for hundreds of thousands of years, these different species likely crossed paths at the same watering holes, watched the same predators, and slept under the same stars. They were the diverse family from which only one line would eventually lead into the dawn of the Stone Age. The sun is setting on the era of the Australopithecus, but this isn't a story of failure. It's a story of a spectacular handoff. We are now roughly 2 million years ago. The African landscape has become a mosaic of extremes. The lush forests of the past are now distant memories, replaced by a vast, unforgiving sea of grass. In this high-stakes environment, the biological blueprint that Lucy and her kin spent 3 million years perfecting is about to undergo its most radical upgrade yet. Imagine a small group of hominins huddled near a dry riverbed in the Olduvai Gorge. They look familiar, small-statured, bipedal, and hairy, but something is different. One of them picks up a palm-sized river cobble. With a deliberate, forceful strike, they hit it against another stone. Crack. A thin, razor-sharp flake of basalt flies off. This moment changes everything. This is the birth of the Oldowan industry, the world's first toolkit. For millions of years, the Australopithecus adapted to their environment, using their bodies, growing thicker enamel on their teeth or wider basins in their hips. But now a new lineage is emerging, Homo habilis, the handyman. Instead of waiting for evolution to change their teeth, they are using stones to do the work.
They are slicing meat off carcasses and smashing bones to reach the nutrient-rich marrow inside. This high-protein, high-fat brain food acts like rocket fuel for their evolution. In this final chapter, we witness a biological arms race. While the robust Paranthropus, the nutcracker man, is doubling down on massive jaws to eat tough plants, the early members of the genus Homo are taking a different path. Their jaws are shrinking, and their brains are expanding. The cranial capacity, which hovered around 400 to 500 cubic centimeters for millions of years, begins to climb toward 600, then 700. The forehead begins to rise, and the face begins to tuck under the crane case. This transition was not a clean break. For a long time, the last of the Australopithecus and the first of the humans walked the same trails. They likely watched one another from across the savanna, one group relying on the strength of their skeletons, the other on the sharpness of their tools. But as the climate became even more unstable, the specialists like Paranthropus found themselves trapped in a niche that was disappearing. The Australopithecus did not simply vanish, they paved the way. They gave us the upright gait that allowed us to travel long distances. They gave us the hand structure that allowed us to grip tools. They were the brave, experimental ancestors who proved that a primate could survive on the ground, under the open sky. As the video fades to black, we see a single set of footprints leading away from the trees and towards the horizon. The genus Homo is about to step onto the global stage, but they are walking on legs designed by the Australopithecus. We are the legacy of their survival.